And now I would like to introduce our first speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Long. She's a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an active advocate of immigrant and refugee rights as well in Canada, and frequently presents and advises on immigration issues to organizations, universities, members of parliament, unions, and the media. She has also testified several times before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on various immigration policies. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors from psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a Master's of Law degree from Osgood Law School, York University, where she focused on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law for foreign workers. Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, a prestigious list of which only 65 lawyers in Canada belong. Elizabeth has often presented to students and employers to help remove barriers and to help make connections to boost employment for newcomers in Canada. Elizabeth, it's such a pleasure to have you today. I know there's a number of announcements that happened yesterday by IRCC, and we really appreciate the time you're taking to support our employers, our schools, and our students. And today we're going to share your experience as you know it today, but I understand that things are changing rapidly. So I do want to say a caveat that there will be an update opportunity for us to share recent information based on the announcements yesterday with Elizabeth at a future date. But today we want to pass the floor to you, Elizabeth, to share with everyone here, what are the top 10 immigration questions that you get asked by employers and recruiters when hiring newcomers and international students? The floor is yours.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. I think, Devont, what you guys do is absolutely wonderful, to connect international students to employers. I think international students, the people who come here as international students are very a very unique set of people. And at our firm, we love hiring international students, and we're going to participate in the Get Hired event, because international students, first of all, to be able to leave your home and to come to a country where you know of no one, and you don't have any contacts, and you don't have your family to depend on, and be able to survive and thrive, that takes a lot of guts and determination. And international students are also people who do really need help on their immigration front from employers. Um, in some respects, that is good for employers because they need your help and they would be loyal just based on the policies that we're going to talk about. They have to stay with you for a certain number of years. But it's also a matter of the fact that if you are an employer who is really there for your employees, then many people are very grateful and they remain loyal well after permanent residence as well. So I'm really happy to be here. I know there are so many questions by employers, and it's great to just be here and knock them out. And as you said, Sisha, we have had many announcements, and there will be more announcements, and times are changing. What I tell you today is true at this point. I mean, I'm not reading the news right now, but I did read it this morning. But at this point, immigration changes so fast that whatever I tell you today, it might change tomorrow. It definitely will change by next month. And so if you guys are okay with it, we're going to put you on a news list where when news comes out, we inform people on the news list. It's just a way for us to inform you. It's not like we don't advertise or anything on there. And if you don't like it, please feel free to unsubscribe. But it's just a way for us to keep you updated on the news.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So, Sisha, shall we go through these questions then?
Yes. So I'm going to ask the questions and give you a moment to think about the answers. I know this is something that you deal with every day, Elizabeth. So number one, are international students eligible to work part-time?
Okay, so based on the current rules, International students, when they are full-time students in Canada, are able, and they have their study permits, they are able to work part-time. Now, what are these part-time hours? Right now, they're 20 hours off campus. On campus, they can work full-time, but off campus, 20 hours a week off campus. The government had made an announcement that they wanted to change that to 24 hours a week. It hasn't been formally instituted yet. So you still go by the old rules of the 20 hours a week until the new announcement is made. Okay. When they are on scheduled breaks, those are breaks that are in the academic calendar that they don't need to be studying. They are allowed to work full time. There's no limit to full time. It's not, normally it could be 40 hours, but it could be 60, 80, whatever. That's okay. All right.
So for clarity, Elizabeth, that would mean they can do full-time during a co-op or full-time for an internship if it's a scheduled break or it's part of their program.
So scheduled breaks are different from the co-op and internship. So when we talk about the second question, which is, are they eligible to work full-time? There's two kinds of, well, there's three ways that they can work full-time while they are studying
Okay.
as full-time students. If they're studying part-time, or if they're not studying, they're not allowed to work based on just because they have a study permit. So
Okay.
one is if they're working on campus, they can work full-time. Second is if they are on a scheduled break. So these are breaks in the academic calendar, for example, a summer break, okay? Then they can work full-time in the summers. Third time is when they are working in a co-op or internship program that is integral to their education, and they hold a co-op work permit, allowing them to do so. So
Perfect.
in that situation, make sure you check to make sure that the co-op work permit covers the time that they need to work for you, because sometimes those can expire as well. And also that sometimes the co-op work permits may be for another school. Maybe they changed the program. And so you need to make sure that whatever is stated on the co-op work permit covers what you want them to do.
Okay, great. Thank you. And for number two, the second part I have, because we do have employers here and, at Get Hired at Home, we will have over 10 employers participating. So if they hire them, let's say for an internship or a co-op during school, can you share, are there any paths to PR to retain, international students or newcomers who are on a temporary foreign worker program?
Right. So the pathway towards permanent residence, and that's sort of 2 and 3. There are different pathways. And it's probably, it'll take me at least an hour to go through everything there. There are certain, but I'll give you sort of a heads up on certain things.
Okay.
So right now in Canada, we have a lot of people competing for a very few spots for permanent residence. It's estimated that we have around 1 million people on study permits and 1.3 million people on work permits. And we only have around 200,000 spots this year for permanent residence. The government has announced that they may want to change those numbers, probably to be even less than that. Excuse me. So as a result, we have very many people competing for very few spots. And this was not the case a few years ago. This has really come to a head. I think we are at the peak of how much competition there is right now for the few permanent resident spots. And so a lot of people before were able to apply for permanent residence with very little help from the employers. The employers might give them a letter confirming that they have been working with them for a year, and then afterwards they were able to apply for permanent residence on their own. This year, and probably in the next couple of years, while the competition is so high, many people will need employers to help them get more points for example, for the express entry system, which is a competition, they may need them to get more points. There are also provincial nominee programs, which are employer-based, where the employer would have to offer them a job offer, and the employer basically supports them in the application, and so the employer needs to submit a form. There are other situations where there's a new rule and community initiative where certain smaller cities and municipalities are able to help employers from those places to offer job offers and get their employees to get permanent residence. In terms of which route works, it's not a one size fits all. Every single person has their own unique set of circumstances, and they will need different kinds of help. For example, some people may be from countries where they have free trade agreements with Canada, or they are from one of the countries where there is a youth program called the IEC program. And in those circumstances, in order to get a work permit, not only to get permanent residence, but sometimes just to extend their current work permits that are going to expire, the applicants can apply for a work permit that is LMIA exempt. So, for example, they can, as long as you register an offer of employment where you put in the details of their employment, and if you put in the details of their employment, as long as they're working on their work permit, you have to adhere to those, what they're doing, the hours, salary, etc. Then we can go and apply for a work permit just with the registration. That's it. That's called IEC programs, free trade agreement programs. If they speak French, just speaking and listening to a moderate level, we can also get Francophone work permits. So some of these kind of programs, charitable work permits, some of these programs are less onerous for employers to help them. And with these, that might give, they normally can get 50 points for what's called arranged employment for an express entry, and they can get those points. There are other programs, like I said, like the OINP, where the employer needs to be a little bit more involved, where they sign a form, etc. And finally, there are those LMIAs, those dreaded LMIAs, where the employer may need to advertise. There are certain programs like the Global Talent Stream that help STEM workers, where the employer does not have to advertise. There's a and they're exempt from recruiting, and they have to provide a labor market benefit plan instead. So there's all sorts of different ways we can take a look at how an employer may help the employee.
Okay. So just to be clear, if I'm an employer, I am able to hire, international students or newcomers for an internship or a co-op program. And what you're talking about right now, it's, when they complete their program, and the next step would be that individual would get their post-grad work permit. And they would have, the student or the newcomer is responsible to show that to the employer.
Yeah.
And then the third step is, once they have that post-grad work permit, in most cases, it would be a time period of 2 to 3 years. But within that time period of 2 to 3 years, then that candidate goes through the permanent residence pathway, and that journey has many opportunities for them to try to secure PR. But I do understand what you're saying is it is a very competitive process, but they've got 2 to 3 years to do that, correct?
That's right. It is a competitive process, and the people who can compete the best are employers who can help them.
Got it. So if I'm a newcomer with an employer offer, that helps me get more points, and then I lead the process, and I ask my employer for assistance. Is that how it works? Because I'm going to question number 4, just for employers to understand, like, what is their responsibility when they hire an international student? If you could maybe just clarify that.
Right. What's your responsibility when you hire an international student? The first thing is you have to make sure that they can actually work legally. So when a student is able to apply for a work permit, a post-grad work permit, as long as they submit the work permit while they have a study permit available, and within 90 days of them completing the program, their study program, they can work while waiting for the work permit to be issued.
That's
Okay.
good to know.
Right now, there's around 3 to 4 months waiting period to get the work permit. And
Okay.
they don't have to wait until they have the work permit in their hand in order to start.
That's good
That,
news. Okay.
okay. The government issues this letter. It's titled WP-EXT letter. And this letter is, on the one hand, it's nice. On the other hand, it's very annoying. Okay. The nice thing is that the letter, most students get it. Some students don't get it. They still can work. But this letter, the government tried to issue it to help you as an employer understand that, yes, they can work while they're waiting for the work permit to be issued. The annoying thing about this work permit letter is that it has this random date assigned to it. Usually right now they put 6 months. Before they were putting 4 months, where it says something like this person can work until this date or when a decision is made, whichever is earlier. And so what it makes you think is, okay, if it goes beyond this date and there's no decision, then this person's status is over and I can't hire them. No, that is not the case. Okay. This random date, don't pay attention to this random date. This person can work until a decision is made. It's even on the IRCC website where it says to tell you guys this, but who checks the IRCC website? Who can find these things, right? But what I'm telling you is, as long as the person doesn't have a decision yet, they can work until the work permit is issued. So then you say, well, how do I know if a decision has been made yet? The best way to do it is to get them to give you a screenshot of their profile, which of their online profile, which will show when the application was submitted and if a decision has been made on the case. Okay, and I would probably get them to show this to you maybe, once a month or so, just to send you the screenshot so you can make sure that they can work.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So, so my understanding is, again, we know that internships and co-ops, they can work as you've described it. Once they graduate and they've applied for their post-grad work permit, they can work while they're waiting. The employer just asks them for a screenshot to see that they have applied and what the decision has been or not. Once they get the post-grad work permit, then they are eligible based on the approval. Usually it's 2 to 3 years that they can work full-time as a graduate, or a newcomer could work potentially if they're a spouse as well, on that work permit. And then within those 2 to 3 years, they then have different options to apply for PR, because now they are working with a Canadian employer, which boosts their points. So there is a pathway here that you've outlined.
Yeah, normally it's 1 year. I've seen like if they
Oh, okay.
get a 1 year program, they get a 1 year work permit. Right now, this can all change next month.
Okay.
Probably it's 1 year or 3 years.
1 year or 3 years.
1
Okay.
year, or sometimes it can be in between. But the other thing that you want to keep in mind is, if you want to hire someone and they're really good and you want them to stay, you might want to know ahead of time what you would need to do in order to help them stay. And if you're willing to do that, and you might want to communicate that to them earlier on, just because sometimes if you, for example, you're not able to do a LMIA, that you might let them know that, hey, we can hire you, but the LMIA is not something that you might be willing to do. Or if you are willing to do it and you help and you say, yes, we're willing to do that, that certainly could be an incentive to attract them to continue and to join you and continue working with you.
Mm-hmm. And so let's take that a little bit further, Elizabeth, because some people may not know what an LMIA is or the some of the acronyms. So for number 5, like what is my responsibility if I pursue the LMIA or the OINP to hire a newcomer? I think it's really important that you've just mentioned that this could be an attraction strategy to attract the best workers or the best talent to your organization. If you have a hard to fill role or a hard to fill location and you're looking for specific skill sets, I think it's important for employers to know that they can use this as an advantage and as a perk. But could you please explain what is their responsibility if they do pursue like the LMIA as an example?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's certainly a perk when an employer, when they're speaking to a potential hire, to say, okay, not only are we going to hire you right now, we are going to help you with your pathway to get permanent residence. And to have a clear pathway for them to get to permanent residence is something I think that is certainly an attraction and a retention strategy. Because most of these applications, they are going to be employer specific. They can only work for you until they get permanent residence. And permanent residence for many of these programs will take at least 2 or 3 years to be completed. Okay. So the LMIA is called Labor Market Impact Assessment. What it is it's an application with the Service Canada where for the most part, there are different kinds of LMIAs, but for the most part, an employer would have to try to recruit Canadians first. Now they want people to recruit people with open work permits as well, and see if they can hire someone in who is in Canada first before we can get a LMIA. If you can't find someone with the abilities and willingness to do the job, then we go and apply with Service Canada, and they will issue. We say we can't, and it's a positive labor market opinion assessment, and they will issue the LMIA. Now, with the LMIA, you can apply for a work permit to extend someone's application, someone's work permit. You can also apply, it will give the person 50 points for permanent residence for the main permanent residence application called Express Entry. And so for a lot of students, they need that 50 points to be competitive and to be
Okay.
able to be invited to apply.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That's really helpful. So I know that not all employers participate in support or are understanding about the LMIA, so this is very helpful. Can international students get a PR permanent residence if employers don't assist students or newcomers?
So it depends on the situation. It used to be that majority of international students, they needed very little help from the employers. They just needed to prove they had a 1 year and they got a letter from the employers, and that's it. Right now, because there are so many people who are trying to apply, many people may not be competitive enough without employers' help to get the permanent residence. And the level of employment help, employers help, like I said, it can differ. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to apply for LMIA. It could be other ways to depend on the individual circumstances. But oftentimes we are seeing now that employers are coming to us and saying, we have this employee, they're an international student, and they say they can't get permanent residence without our help. What can we do? And that is something that is a very important question to answer. You know, as you are hiring them or as they have been with you and you want to keep them, I think that's probably one of the main questions that you have to answer if you want to continue working with international students.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And in terms of documentation, what kind of documents do employers keep after they hire a newcomer or an international student?
So when you hire an international student and they're on an open work permit, you can just make sure that they have the proper status while you're hiring them. So if they are on a study permit and you want to make sure that you have proper hours, that they don't go over their hours while they're studying. Well, scheduled breaks are they're okay, but while they're in classes. Afterwards, when they've graduated, you want to make sure that they have proper status to work. Like I said, there's a period of time before they get their work permit that they can work if they submitted their application properly. And then you want to make sure that their work permits are going to expire, that you have a way to extend their work permits if they need to extend. And it's not that easy to extend these work permits, which is why we try to get them permanent residence before their current work permits expire.
Okay, thank you. What about auditing requirements? Are there any auditing requirements when I hire a newcomer international student as an employer?
So when you hire someone on an open work permit, the employers are not subject to auditing requirements. But if you're going to apply for LMIA, or if you're going to apply for a work permit, like I said, those LMIA exempt work permits where you register the offer of employment for them, the 1 out of 4 employers are audited. And what happens with these compliance audits is that they want to see things like payroll stubs. They want to see things like, what duties have they been doing? They want to just make sure that whatever you have registered, that you have complied with, that you're not changing their salaries, that their hours are the same as what you said that they would be doing, that their duties are the same. You're not giving them a promotion or putting them to do something else, because these are very highly regulated kinds of work permits that if you're going to hire someone that goes beyond the post-grad work permits and you need to do something extra for them, that is where I would highly, highly recommend that you have a good lawyer working with you who can advise you of your responsibilities and make sure that whatever you had put on the LMIA application or the offer of employment for these other kinds of work permits, that these are accurate and are doable in the future for you to adhere to them.
Okay, so the one thing that this raises for me is, we do want to promote and grow our talent as in an organization. So when you say they have to stay in the same role, like, is there a time limit? Because sometimes you bring in new talent or early talent with the goal that they will be moving up within the organization. We want them to get better jobs. So can you just clarify that, please?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that when I say you can't change their role, it only is for people who have LMIAs or the
Oh,
employer specific work permits, not the open work permits like the post-grad work permits. When they're
okay,
on a post-grad work permit, they can work, you can get them to do whatever. It's not,
okay.
there's no restrictions on that. It's only on the employer specific work permits. And hopefully with those, it's a way for them to get permanent residence. Hopefully they don't need to stay on those kind of work permits forever.
Okay, understood. So if I hire a student or a newcomer on a post-grad work permit, they can, I can
They can
rotate them
do
to different
whatever.
parts of the organization. They can do anything. And then only if they're in the LMIA or on an employer-specific work permit, that's like a temporary time limit on that role until they get the PR.
Yes. I do want to say though that permanent residence, um, to strategize on permanent residence is very important early on. So for
Okay.
example, there are some occupations such as, for example, healthcare, right? That a person, for example, who is a personal support worker would get a lot of points if they have that role. Now, if you say, well, I'm going to put you in as a supervisor instead of a personal support worker, they might not get the points in order to get that special demand. So it's like the occupation in demand. So what I would suggest is with these international students, it's never too early to plan ahead on what do they need to do
Mhm.
in order to for you to hire them on a long-term basis because they have permanent residence. When they have permanent residence, you do whatever you want with them. But it's not, yes, they can certainly play any role on a open work permit. But what happens after the work permit expires?
Hmm. So these are really great tips. I'm writing down, a couple of things here. How to use, this planning ahead as a perk to organize and attract, but also retain newcomers and international students in the organization. I think is a very strategic opportunity for employers. Also, the pathing. So never too early to plan ahead. Thanks for joining, Jody. Great to have you here. Jody is one of our employers that will be joining the Get Hired at Home event through Quadwheel. A pleasure to have them with us as well. And then number 9, hopefully this is not needed, but can they lay off an international student or newcomer if the business needs change?
Yes. The answer is yes. You can lay off anyone that you want to lay off who is on a work permit. Um, it's same as if you're hiring a Canadian. Now, does that is that going might create a wrench in their own permanent residence plans? Maybe, right? But you as a business owner, as an employer, yes, you're perfectly able to lay off people. Um, I mean, I'm not an employment lawyer, so I don't want to say, from an employment law basis as to what exactly you owe people for what do you call it? As notice or notice
Yep.
periods, etc. So that I'm not advising on that, but from an immigration basis, yes, you're well able to lay off anyone, whether or not
Okay.
you have an LMIA or OINP.
Okay, great. I mean, not great. I don't want anyone to be I don't want anyone to be laid off, but I think it's important that we address some of these questions so that we're very open and transparent and have employers feeling more comfortable in terms of like maybe thinking of things that are not true. So I just want them to know exactly what their responsibilities are, what they can do, and also what rights they have as well as an employer. And then finally, like who is responsible for the cost? Is it the employer or is it the candidate?
It depends on what kind of application you're applying for. So the one application that the employer is responsible for the costs for both the lawyers and the government fees would be the LMIA. If you're doing an LMIA, it is the responsibility of the employer to cover all costs there.
Okay.
If you're doing other kinds of work permits, the offer of employer compliance fee of $230 is payable by the employer. But otherwise, these other applications, especially permanent residence applications, other kinds of work permits, open work permits, etc., the government does not require the employer to pay them. And the you can certainly say, well, I can help you, but you as a worker, you want to hire someone, you want to pay the government fees, you would be responsible for those costs.
Okay. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has been really informative and clear. And I know that it'll be very useful for the employers when they have questions. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your expertise.